People are so distanced from literature, the way it's taught in schools, that they think that people who write are magicians on a mountaintop somewhere. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much illiteracy in this country. So by doing it in public, I show people that it's a job of work, like being a plumber or an electrician.
They always want the writer to work for nothing. And the problem is that there's a goddamn many writers who have no idea that they're supposed to be paid every time they do something. They do it for nothing. Good, they're going to look at me. I'm going to be noticed. You tell me, are they any less the media whore than I? I think not. They just haven't, nobody's offered to buy their soul. I sell my soul, but at the highest rates.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about sociology of style, because you wrote a couple of articles.
Yeah.
I didn't look at the site that much, but my first question, do you want to write more articles of a nonfiction nature about your life, or do you prefer short stories? Do you prefer the fictional narrative?
I prefer the fictional narrative. I'm interested. I enjoy writing essays. I enjoy it more when I do it regularly. I find that it's very hard for me to start doing it from scratch. But once I get going, I can really get into it and I start to enjoy it. But overall, I'd say I prefer fiction.
Mm. So I don't look at the site only when your writing was involved, because it's interesting for me to read people I know, especially when they're not, like if they're not celebrity icon types. Like I enjoy science fiction a lot, so I read a lot of Ellison. I read Ray Bradbury, Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke.
Yeah.
And I read batshit crazy stuff too, like David Foster Wallace. But he's very Thomas Pynchon for me. He's very hard to read and get.
Very cerebral and convoluted.
Which I think, would be a deficiency for a writer when the very act of reading can be painful.
Right. I mean, I think it's written for a very specific audience, but I do enjoy his work, and I enjoy Thomas Pynchon too from time to time.
What was it? Oh God, I read Gravity's Rainbow, and it was like torture for me. I really couldn't get. It was like, come on, make your point. Make your point.
Gravity's Rainbow was tough.
His paragraphs are so dense, and it's like you're reading a paragraph is like a novel to this guy. He just won't shut up. He's got like what Stephen King would call diarrhea of the mouth.
Oh yeah, he does. But, I mean, the book that really got me of his is V.
Yeah.
Did you ever read that?
I did.
It's total madness. I mean, it's absolutely, like, I read it, and I feel like as I was reading it, I was thinking, am I reading this? Is this happening? Am I getting this? Like...
Right. Did I forget? I forgot to mention. I did mention two writers, but there is another book that has always been incredible for me. When I read it, I was completely swept away in it, and that was Ulysses by James Joyce. When I read that,
I never have read it. I have to say.
My God, Eve, it is the most fantastic book. One of the most fantastic books, and it's on my list. I have to, I would love to make a movie of that. I really would, but I don't know how you could do it.
Wow, that's ambitious.
Yeah.
Even having not read it, I think I can say that.
Well, I mean, it's like, like one of the first things, well, actually at the end of the book is the saga of, I believe, Leopold Bloom's wife, and it is like the first time it's the first time you ever read a description of a female orgasm. And it's really fantastic reading it, because it's like, it shows that it's actually very feminist and very positive in a way, because it shows that women, this was written at a time, the turn of the century, where, women practically didn't have souls back then. But this is just an amazing character to read. And it just ends like that. It's like, it's done in such a disjointed, almost cut up method, like William Burroughs, except of course it probably make more sense than William Burroughs, but the way he writes her is just so fantastic, and it just comes out of left field to end the book, and I'm like, my God. I had to go back and read it. I read it maybe 3 or 4 times, and then I read it again. But for contemporary, I do really enjoy Stephen King quite a bit, because he's very easy to read. He writes in such a conversational way. Even his later books, which are nowhere near as good as the stuff he started out with, I always thought he was a really good writer in that regard. In the very, I guess, what's the word? I'm thinking of Mark Twain. I'm thinking of Huckleberry Finn. Huckleberry Finn is one of my favorites. I really love that book too.
That was wonderful. Stephen King's last great book was his book on writing, I think. On writing,
and he wrote that like during his convalescence from his accident, right?
Yes, he sure did. And I think it's widely agreed that something after that accident, it just didn't go anymore.
Well, there isn't, I mean, I've read I've read his epic books of late, like things like Under the Dome, but it's not. It doesn't really get me. I think my favorite book of his was The Stand.
Oh man, yeah, that's one of my all-time favorite books.
And
Period.
I think he really hit his heights with that.
Yeah, it's great. They're making it into a movie, and I think it's actually going to be good. Finally.
I heard that. I'm a little bit worried about the budget because they said something about $87 million for the first part. But the thing is, all the most expensive stuff happens in the first part, so they're going to need a little more money than that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll raise it somehow.
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey's signed on, so I think that'll do it.
Yeah, he's going to be Randall Flagg.
Yeah.
I think he might, because I see him more as a Stuart Redmond type, the kind that Gary Sinise played.
No, I think he's the walking man.
Yeah, the walking dude, right?
Yeah, the walking dude. That's not the same as Randall Flagg, right?
No, yeah, the walking dude is Randall Flagg.
Okay, it's been a minute since I read it, obviously, although I love it to death. But I will definitely reread it before the movie comes out so that I can.
But I know that Stephen King,
about.
when he was talking about casting the movie back when he wanted to make it as a movie himself, he said that he saw somebody more in the vein of Clint Eastwood or Jack Nicholson or Robert Duvall playing the part.
Yeah, but I can totally see Matthew McConaughey somehow in that.
You see him like walking
cohort.
Down. He going, all right.
All right.
Yeah. Do you deliberately read bad writers?
Only if there's something about there. But like I read some of those, what do you call it? The vampire ones the True Blood. I read like one of those books.
Oh, I forget her name. Who's
Charlene something. Charlene something. I don't know. I can't remember. And I thought it was kind of cute. It was sweet. It kind of was amusing to me because there were so many passages dedicated to like what Sookie was wearing. It would be like, and now Sookie is putting on her beige eyeshadow to match her beige pants and her pearls, or like, you know what I mean? It was like
I like that you're adding the Southern accent to the description.
Well, yeah, I mean, it has to.
Well, I've read. I pick up a book. I mean, I remember when I was working at my job, there would be a lot of books that people would like throw out, and I'd pick them up just for the hell of it. So I'd read stuff. I'd read like Clive Cussler and
yeah. I've heard good things about his writing. I've never read it. No, not so much. Okay, never mind.
Be prepared. Just be prepared if you're going to pick up Clive Cussler. And then there was Stuart Woods, who writes about this lawyer who gets into these adventures. Park Barrington, I think, is his name. He's got a whole series of books. He is just absolutely terrible because every woman in his books is blonde, 6 feet tall with huge breasts.
Right, of course.
Every single one of them. And then there was this one about, I forgot, there was this one about some kind of ginseng murder mystery or something that had to do with ginseng root or something. And it was just, it's like romance and stuff. And it feels like it's written by a 14-year-old for crying out loud. And I look in the back of the book and it's written by like a university professor. I'm like,
I know, right? But they're probably smart to do that because they're making bank. I don't know. Charlene
These are
Harris,
bestsellers. They're on the New York Times bestseller list, so go figure.
Exactly. That's the thing. I mean, New York Times bestseller list, or do you want the praise of your peers?
Yeah.
I guess it just depends. If you're gonna get both, that's groovy.
So with the sociology of style, it's kind of hard for me to say, but I feel. I don't know. It's a lot of it is very feminist driven, and I'm not talking the new feminism. I guess the progressive postmodern feminism, if there is such a thing. But it kind of reminds me of like bra burning, wild armpit hair, hate everything a man says, does, believes, and like.
I don't think that's real feminism.
Like
anyway.
Hall & Oates, I can't go for that.
Yeah, but
I feel like I have to look over.
I think that there's a pretty broad spectrum of things that they're touching on over there. I think what you're talking about feels more to me like Jezebel magazine or something like that, which has gone more and more and more in that direction. I think that's just what they're getting hits on.
Well, so I feel like I have to look after my own gender in a way. We can't have so many people backing up one gender. We have to have equality, and equality is equality. There is a separation. We can't deny that we are different. But I feel that feminist groups are are not looking and yearning for equality as human beings.
Well, I think that they're trying to correct what they perceive as an imbalance, and they're not interested in creating equality in a top-down kind of way, but they're interested in creating it by correcting at various different levels that what they see as an imbalance, or I should say what we see as an imbalance. I consider myself a feminist, but I probably wouldn't occur for you the way that you're talking about most of the
Well,
time.
I mean, you do know that as human beings, our primary goal seems to be superiority or dominion, not equality. It's about winning an insane contest of sorts at all costs. We're highly competitive as a species, and we try to win. And it is a mindless competition in a way.
I think that's true from a certain perspective, but I think that that's a fairly, I think that's a microcosm of what we're about. I think we exist on multiple planes.
I hope so.
One.
I hope so. But
I think that there's some truth to that, but I actually don't think that's the whole picture.
No, probably not. I mean, I'm only a man, but I do feel.
Are bad. No.
I feel that women are fighting other women. I think they fight over beauty, over the concept of aging, over perceived youth, over their respective abilities.
That, yeah.
And minorities tend to fight each other. Sometimes in my libertarian mind, I feel that each supposed minority is fighting the other for the loser sweepstakes.
And sometimes in my angry, far extreme feminist mind, I think that it's all like a plot by the men to get the women to kill each other.
Well, yeah.
And to get the minorities to kill each other.
There's an old Yiddish joke about a rabbi in a shul who tells his congregation, "We are nothing." And the black janitor in the back of the temple who's sweeping up says, "Yeah, I'm nothing too." And the rabbi points to him and says, "Look who wants to be nothing." It's like a persecution orgy where everybody wants to feel as though they've been slighted in life and they're competing to be the most oppressed. You know,
I think that sums it up in a sense, but I also think that sums up, the humor of it too. Like, I think, people just seem to get very, very entrenched in their points of view. And I do feel that there seems to be a lack of ability to conduct a conversation that has any relativism in it. It seems to me that people seem to just cling to these really extreme points of view without considering anything anyone else is saying. It's like everybody's just shouting their own point of view to see who can be the loudest and drown everybody else out.
There is that. I remember I got into a bit of a row with some of your friends a few months back. Yes. And I made this point. I made this point on I did an episode with Bronwyn. We did a podcast, and I talked about Facebook, and I talked about how I've been unfriended by people because I tend to publicly disagree with them, and perhaps they either appear foolish or they just don't want to have anything to do with me. But it came from an observation I made that I did not easily fit into any particular statistic or category. Mm-hmm. And the discussion had to do with white male privilege and how men keep women down, and I was sort of beset on all sides by contrasting opinion. Now the thing is, I'm a white male. I'm 42.
Yeah.
I'm what you would call a homemaker. I'm very similar to June Cleaver or Donna Reed. I take care of my daughter. I pick her up from school. I help her with her homework. I clean the house and I cook the meals. Bronwyn makes all the money. She takes care of us more or less financially. She brings home the bacon and I fry it up in the pan.
Sure.
So Bronwyn has always made more money than me, actually. And
than me, I'm sure, also.
Yes. I don't have a problem with it, but I took exception with the concept of white male privilege. I was never given anything in my life. People came along and took things from me.
But isn't it possible that your experience is the exception and not the rule?
Well, I think the exception should be part of
doesn't mean it shouldn't be considered as, significant, but I'm just saying that, just because that's your experience doesn't mean it's the most common experience.
But I remember I was being lumped into a category. Some people were saying, you have no right to complain, you're a white male. I mean, come on.
Yeah, and that's fair either. I agree with you. I mean, I don't think that's, I don't
doubt that those people, I doubt that a lot of those people who disagreed with me were homeless for 2 years. I doubt that they were living in a residential hotel.
Sure.
Like I was
mean,
when
I think
was
at the end of the day, when we're trying to make these grand points by, making sweeping generalizations,
that's the problem.
We effectively do is we disenfranchise people from their specific experience, which is considerable and important for who they are. So, I mean, I don't seek to, dismiss anybody's individuality, but, I do think there's some use to categories and stuff like that, but I just think that it's overused. I mean, I feel like people don't listen with a great deal of compassion. but they do listen with a great deal of passion.
Well, there's too much reliance on statistics. You assume that white people are Republican and black people are Democrat, or women are Democrat and men are Republican, or something like that. You do,
Right.
you put one person into a group. You want to put people into groups because it's easier to categorize them, and that's how politics sees us anyway.
That's how most people tend to organize their thoughts, I'm afraid, is by compartmentalization.
But I know that there are I'm full of inconsistencies. My
Sure
politics changed when my daughter was born, really.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I considered myself liberal for a very long time, and I didn't become a conservative. I'm not a conservative. I don't value any political party. I'm pro-choice. I believe in a woman's right to choose, but I also believe abortion is murder. I'm for gay marriage, but I believe homosexuality is wrong. I'm for the legalization of marijuana and other drugs, but I don't use drugs, nor would I encourage or promote them. We can discourage behavior without banning it.
Well, that's a very cognitively complex point of view, Dave, and I just don't think that
That's
most of the voting public possesses that level of cognitive complexity, which doesn't mean that they're stupid. It just means that they're not thinking it through in that way. And so you know what I mean? I think that, as a thinking person and as a person that has strong points of view and strong opinions about politics and about a lot about social issues, I don't really think the best answer is to try to beat people into submission and into taking my position. I think the best thing to do is try to encourage people to think more dynamically about what they're looking at, instead of just, like you said, making all kinds of assumptions and buying into the statistics.
We're talking about gray area. There's an enormous gray area involved in it.
Enormous gray area, right. Unfortunately, probably like a high percentage of voting America doesn't really see it that way, because their worldview is a little bit more fundamentalist. I mean, it's a little bit more, and I'm not trying to dismiss that group of people either. I mean, it's just a little bit more based on an authority frame, where they're more comfortable with the idea of one authority, and religion takes a strong influential position in what they're doing, because it helps with moral delineation, and all of that. I mean, I just think that's a lot of people.
That's another point I wanted to make. I consider myself an atheist, but I try not to pick on other people who are religious, and I really would rather we coexist, because to me, atheism is a belief.
Yeah,
it's a belief in nothing, but it's still a belief.
That's right. I mean, I've known some pretty dogmatic fundamentalist atheists.
And they're always so full of themselves, though. This is what I don't like about atheists, is that they're so, we know, and you believe in invisible gods. Why don't you believe in an invisible?
But like Bill Maher is that way, and I adore
Bill
him.
Maher, yeah.
I mean, I think he's great. I love him, I do. But he's an idiot when it comes to that. I mean, he has no tolerance, no moderation whatsoever in that area, and he's a total fundamentalist. And it's just so humorous to me to watch, because I'm like, how can you be so well adjusted in so many areas and have such an intelligent processing system for information, and then when it comes to that, it's just a hot button issue for him. He responds totally emotionally and totally passionately without any compassion or empathy.
Well, yeah, he does that, but he also and then he also kind of does the same thing with Republicans. He kind of puts them all into one category. He says Republicans are stupid, blah, 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 don't know how to read or write, watch Fox.
Yes, although I do feel like some of that is more hyperбolic than the religion thing. I don't feel like he has like a...
Well, I'd like to hope it is, but the thing is, he's talking to an audience that probably isn't as, as wise as he might be.
Maybe
so
not.
He tends to get a lot of like rallying cheers and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you. I'm so glad I have a woman to talk to here. Because I've been talking to guys mainly.
Yes.
But I want to talk about the UVA thing at the University of Virginia.
Yeah, interesting stuff.
The recent rape claims, the story appeared in Rolling Stone.
Yeah.
We're seeing that the story, at least at this point, appears to be fraudulent, and the elements of the story are flat out untrue. The thing is,
it's very troubling.
When I first read the story, I had a hard time believing it. It read like fiction. There was no corroboration of the details. No one confirmed a single thing. And when you have no evidence...
The reason it read like fiction is because the writer wrote it like fiction and did not employ good journalism. I mean, that's just unacceptable. I can't believe Rolling Stone ran the story without, I don't even understand how that happened. Like, it's troubling because I do believe that there are claims similar to that one that are true, and I've heard a lot of other.
I've heard a few things, but the thing is, this story is so sensationalistic that if my daughter were to read this in 13 years, she would think that the minute she gets onto a college campus, she'll be raped.
Right. Well, that's another. I mean, I don't believe in fear mongering either, and that's definitely part of it. I felt like it was very sensationalistic. I agree with you. I mean, it was really gross. The whole thing is upsetting for so many reasons, and I think it's just so undermining.
What alarms me about this story is that everyone reading the article, a good majority of the people who read it, and a lot of my Facebook friends were very quick to believe the allegations without any evidence or the corroborating information.
Well, there's that passionate, angry, emotional response again. I mean, it's people, feel like they're being
and unfortunately,
or people feel like they're being discriminated against, and then they read something that offers them hard evidence of that happening to someone else, and so they grab onto it without necessarily thinking it through. Can understand why people do that. Rolling Stone knew people would do that, and that's why they ran that story, in spite of the fact that it was bad journalism. So,
but even worse for me and for you, because we're both writers, this is an attack on writers again, and this has happened before. James Frey made up items for his memoir, A Million Little Pieces, and when it was discovered that he lied, that he fabricated it, I remember it was like he was the worst criminal on the planet for a little while. I
felt sorry for him. I felt like that was weird. And that whole thing is a little weird. It's a little different for me because, whatever. I mean, it was his account of something that may or may not have happened, or some aspects of it are true, or whatever. I just don't really care. It was an interesting story. It sold a lot of books for that company.
Well, he came under attack for being what he was, which is a writer. Writers invent.
Exactly. I mean, he tried to sell that book for years without, as a fiction. And then someone said something about it, it should be a memoir. And then he's like, hey, maybe you're right. And then, of course, he sells it. And what writer is going to jump at that chance?
He got a book deal when he said it was true.
Right. So. I mean, he apologized, publicly. I don't think it was right what he did. I think he lacks integrity. However, I don't think he's friggin', he's not Hitler, guys. Like, and the fact that he had to go up on Oprah and get publicly punished, I thought was really funny. Oprah, I feel like every bad person should have to go on Oprah, and she should punish them publicly. I feel like that should be her job. She's amazing at it.
Yeah. So with what happened at the university, the problem here is that there are going to be victims as a result of it, and it's not going to be the one who claimed that she was. And even an allegation of rape, regardless of it being false, is enough to destroy a life. Read horror stories of people who were falsely accused of sex crimes, labeled as sex offenders. It takes years to remove that label. They have to follow a strange procedure. It's tragic. They have to contact local police, identify themselves as sexual offenders, and then it takes years to get their name cleared because of the due process.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, it's really dreadful. I agree with you. Having said that, I also, think being raped is a horrible thing. And, and there have been many, many stories that I've seen in the press that are very corroborated, confirmed examples of this sort of thing happening, which are not given a whole lot of attention or press, and kind of go unnoticed or under the radar. And this was a big deal. It was sensationalized because of where it was published and because of the school. And I think it's a real shame because there have been, you think about the Steubenville rape, which was just the most horrifying thing ever. And the way and what a struggle it was for people to get that on the national radar in the media. It was absolutely a fight. And these people took that cause up and spent their time doing it 100% of the time. And they were fought at every turn,
right?
By the local social hierarchy, by the local government, by the local police. I mean, it was really a tragic situation. And the only victims were this girl, you know what I mean? It's just terrible. And so now here we are reading this story, and I just think it's such a setback. This Rolling Stone story is such a setback for journalism. It's a setback for, rape crisis, which is a real thing. It's a setback for UVA because
something good could come from this. Perhaps if there are more allegations or accusations in the future, perhaps news sources will not just take victims at the word. Maybe they'll investigate more. Maybe they'll get more
yeah,
information.
it's called journalism, dude. Like it's the way it's supposed to be. Like, I don't know what the hell they were thinking. Like I said, I believe Rolling Stone knowingly published that because it was a story that was going to create a stir. It was going to sell copies, and they allowed shoddy journalism on their watch. And they've been known for being relatively clean. Relatively, I mean, they've definitely had some issues over the years, but they're a publication that's pretty respected, not just for their music, but also for their journalism. And it's like, what are you thinking, man?
Well, I think they were cutting edge at the time in the 60s and maybe part of the 70s, but then they became kind of a tastemaker, and they wielded their own power in a way,
Yeah.
Some articles were really fantastic to read. Mostly news, mostly political stuff back in the 80s was really fantastic. But so having the child, having Pearl, how has that? It's the stupidest question in the world, but I'm gonna have to ask you anyway. How has it changed you?
Oh, no, it's not a stupid question. I think it's changed me in so many lovely ways. I mean, I don't even, and not a change like all of a sudden I'm different, but more like, just I feel like I've grown, I guess. Maybe that's a, cheesy response, but I do. I mean, she's so beautiful, and I focus on her in such a unique way. I want everything to be for her, and it makes a lot of the things that I focused on before seem silly, and unimportant. And I might have paid lip service in the past to having certain points of view about certain things, like whether it's my body image or whether it was like money or whatever. But now that I have her, it's like I've kind of cemented my perspective on those things in a much more immovable way.
Had you always wanted to have a child?
I think at some level I did. I think there was a period of time when I was young where I said, I don't want to have kids. And then there was a period of time where I was like, maybe, I don't know. But that's
exactly what happened to me. That's exactly what happened. I didn't really want to have kids. I didn't really think about it. And then we started. We tried for like 2 or 3 years. And then finally Regan was born. But the thing is, it was just like this whole experience of having to deal with the pregnancy and then having to deal with the doctors, and the doctors are just terrible, and they just for me, I mean, I was there, and doctors really don't talk to fathers. They're always talking to the mothers. They treat the fathers as though they're a fly in the room. They're a distraction. But then, and then they put her on a special diet because they said she had diabetes, like they would, even though her blood sugar, the diet that they put her on was far more food than she actually eats.
Are you talking about Bronwyn? I know I had a very irritating experience regarding gestational diabetes, which I also had, and I was very pissed off about the whole thing.
It was the whole thing was planned, and
I felt like it was such bullshit.
And then they wind up doing a C-section anyway, and then if you forget, I forgot. I think we both forgot all throughout this. Oh, we're going home with a baby at the end of this situation.
Yeah. Ooh.
It was like completely anticlimactic in a way too, because I had to go home and feed the cats, and then they call me up and say we're cutting the baby out now, and I'm like, what? Because they gave her
crap.
They gave her these inducement drugs, and they made they made the baby go into distress, so they had to take her out, and then I get in there.
Yeah, well, when they give you the Pitocin. What happens is like your uterus contracts in 3 or 4 different ways. There's like kind of a squeezy contraction and kind of a lifty contraction and kind of a pushy contraction. Like there's all these different things that happen, like different directions the muscles do that in. And when they give you Pitocin, like it all happens at once.
Yeah.
So
she was in a lot of pain too as a result of that.
Yeah, it often has the result of actually stalling labor, even though it's supposed to induce labor.
And I remember saying to Bronwyn, like, she was in a lot of pain, and then they brought an anesthesiologist in to give her something. And I said, do you want to go home? And she's like, yeah. And I said, I'll just get a cab and we'll go home.
That's awesome. Did you?
No, I couldn't do that. They wouldn't let us leave.
Yeah. Yeah, man.
But that's what really shook up my life ultimately, now that I look back. And as you mentioned, it was the birth of my child. It changed everything. And
yeah, I think it makes you more who you are, actually.
everything you think you're ever going to do. You know the old saying, if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans? Well,
Yeah,
change
right.
God to Regan, And
Yeah, right.
she
right.
is like in total control of this house. She's 7 years old. You're going to love this in a few years. She's going to take over. Your daughter's going to take over your house completely.
I have no doubt. She already has.
It's like a siege mentality. It's like Full
Yeah.
Metal Jacket when the drill sergeant comes in and starts shouting at everybody. That's pretty much Regan.
Yes.
Any girl.
That's pretty much Pearl, too, I have to say. She doesn't say it in words yet, but it's just like a sort of wordless shrieking, and everybody just falls in line.
All right. Well, this has been fantastic, and I guess we're going to wrap it up.
Yeah, it's been great conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think this should probably come out January 2nd. It's probably going to be
That's
January.
my dad's birthday, so happy birthday, Papa.
Okay, there you go. All right, Eve. I want to thank you again, and
Yeah.
really, we got to do this again. We got to have some more in-depth talks. We can.
I think it'd be a blast.
Yeah.
We should make it a regular occurrence.
All right. Yeah, I would absolutely like that because I need that point of view.
Yeah, well, it's been really fun. Thank you so much for inviting me to do this. I appreciate it.
All right, and take care and say hi to Pearl for me.
I will. Say hi to Bronwyn and Regan for me.
I will.
Okay, take care, Dave.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What makes a writer is writing. You have to write. You have to sit down and you have to write the book of your dreams. You have to write what you want to be known for. You have to create a universe of your own in print. And there's only one way to do that, and that's to kick out the pages every day. Kick them out and save them. You know, you may write 2 or 3 chapters of a book and decide you hate it. Don't throw it away, save it. It's very easy to do in the computer age. You make a folder for that, you put it away, you save it.
Now for me, I started with short stories when I was 18, sold my first one when I was about 20, and produced pretty much nothing but, well, I wrote a couple of novels, but they were not accepted, and a lot of them were so bad that I didn't even bother to revise them. But the short stories were making money, and I got very comfortable with that format, and I've never wanted to leave it completely behind.
You hear some people who write short stories talk about the fact that in their mind they have these massive novels written about these characters, but really what you see on the page is just a sliver of a story that's in their brain that they could tell it. They could write a novel about it in most cases. Is that true?
It is true, and what happens to me a lot of times is I will start out saying this would be a terrific short story idea, and it balloons and becomes a novel. Misery started as a short story, and Gerald's Game started as a short story. Those were things that I thought would be small and grew to a size where they would be a novel. But on the other hand, there's a story in, there are 3 stories in Just After Sunset that are fairly long. They're in the 22 to 25,000 word length, which would make them novellas. There's one called A Very Tight Place. There's another one called The Gingerbread Girl that was done in Esquire. And there is Anne, which has not been published before. And in fact, Anne was submitted to The New Yorker. And I had a sense that they thought about the story very seriously and sort of wanted it for The New Yorker. But finally what they came back with was, this is just too long for the market. So that can present a problem. There really is that length of 22 to 25,000 words is kind of a twilight zone for writers. It's too short to be a novel, but it's too long to be a short story.